Okay, we're live. Hi, everyone. We are Sunflowers and Red Feathers. I'm Christina.
And I'm Stephanie. We are two moms living in the before and after of child loss.
Join us in this journey as we share our stories of not only loss, but how life after loss can still be full of beauty, love, hope, and joy.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on when we post a new video.
Bye. Bye. Hello, everybody. We're Sunflowers and Red Feathers. I'm Christina.
And I am Stephanie. Today, as you can tell by our title of this episode, we are talking about living the taboo life. So, taboo. Child loss is kind of a taboo subject, isn't it?
Yes.
So, death of a child isn't something we talk about all the time because it's really not that common, and we don't want it to be that common, obviously. And it's not something that we can just bring up with anybody. Like, there are things that we can expect, the death of a grandparent or parents later in age. And we can talk about those with people because that's something that most people can deal with. They understand that. But as a bereaved parent, when you bring up the loss of a child, that kind of changes things up, and it's kind of awkward and uncomfortable. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today.
Yeah.
All right. So what makes it a taboo subject? Obviously, the awkwardness and uncomfortableness is there for a reason. And that's because child loss is sad. It's not normal. And people, when you talk about your child, they are afraid that it's going to make you sad, and they don't want to talk about sad things, and they don't want you to be sad. And so there it is. But in reality, for us, talking about our child is healing, and it's something we really enjoy, right?
Yeah, especially like right off the bat, I think people, they don't want to bring it up because they're afraid of making you cry, because at first that's literally all you do for the first, I don't know, months. Every day it's just cry, and whether it's happy tears, sad tears, angry tears, just thinking about everything makes you cry. And so people don't want that for you, and so they think bringing it up is going to make you cry and that you don't want that. But that is so not true. Even if you make me cry, just the fact that you're saying their name or the fact that you remember them or are thinking about them is awesome. And that's something that we want more of. We don't want you to not talk about them.
Exactly. That's why you see hashtags all the time that say their name. It's so important to us to hear our child's name, and it means the world to us, really. And sure, we might cry every once in a while, but if they are tears like in the here and now, they're most likely happy tears. I know that's how it is for me. Sure, like I live with the everyday, the fact that my child is gone, but if somebody's talking to me about him, those are happy tears because I love to talk about him.
Yeah, and I think that's also something that can change over time. Like at first it might always be sad tears, but once you've found your joy again and have learned to not learned, but you're not in that super raw, hard place all the time, then you can cry more happy tears. But it does take time, and that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah, perfectly okay. But the reality is, we can talk about the death of an elderly person because that's normal, but child loss isn't normal again. And so we have to understand that people aren't going to be comfortable in those positions talking about our children as often as we would like them to be. Yeah. So
yeah,
obviously,
my thought on that was,
go ahead.
I can think of just any random situation where somebody would come up to you or I was a dental assistant for a long time. And so, you did kind of small talk with your patients, and, there's some people who really tell you what's going on in their lives. And so if they, just lost a grandmother or just lost an uncle or whatever, like it's not a taboo thing to be like, oh my gosh, I'm really struggling right now. My grandma just died, because everybody can like empathize with that. It's like, oh yeah, that sucks. I'm so sorry. But if we were to like be in a dental chair and somebody asked us, why we were upset, when like, well, my child just died. Crickets, right?
Cricket.
They can't empathize.
Yeah.
They don't know what to say.
No, they don't. And that's okay, but it's awkward. It's so awkward. For me, my kids, like in the grocery store, somebody will be like, "Oh, look at you've got 4 boys. How fun." And my oldest will be like, well, not my oldest, but my oldest living child will be like, "Actually, there's 5 of us, but my brother's dead." And then it's like, oh, everybody just stops. Like,
Yeah.
I literally had a lady in the line the other day at the grocery store. She, as soon as he said, "Oh, but my brother's dead," she like looked at me all awkward, like, and turned around. And I was like, oh, that was the end of that conversation.
Honestly though, if somebody said that to me, even though I am a bereaved parent, I would probably, that's just so blatant, right? Like kids, they just say the darndest things. Like, well, how do you respond to that? Like, do you say, "Oh, thank you for telling me," or if you actually could relate, like, "Oh, I have a child in heaven too." Still, you just don't expect that, especially kids just come right out and say it, and you're like, "Oh gosh, okay."
Yep. It's
Um,
awkward. There's no way around it, but that's something as bereaved parents that we have to embrace at the time, because that's our life from now on, unfortunately. Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then you should say the question that you said people usually respond with when you say, "Oh, my child is gone." Do you remember?
Yeah. They'll say like, "I'm sorry," or, that's just a complete, you know, conversation ender. But I think being a grieving parent means that we have to give ourselves and a whole lot of other people more grace than we ever have before, because we feel things with so much more intensity now, but other people just don't have a clue, you know? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's just,
how it is.
I don't know where my thought was going with that. It went away. But so our next bullet point then was, since we are being forced to live in this taboo life, how do we do it? So I was trying to find some articles and trying to see what other people's advice was. And I came across this one that was actually more geared towards people not talking, or how they can talk to children about grief and losing like a sibling. And actually, I'm going to put the article in the URL link in the YouTube video so you can take a look at it. You should read it. It's actually pretty good. But this other article I found was called 11 Tips for Coping with the Death of an Adult Child, because Stephanie and my child are, Joshua and Mason, we're both pretty young, but we understand that there's some bereaved parents out there that have older adult children that have passed. And so I was trying to find some helpful points, and I felt like this article did a really good job of explaining a couple of things. So I'm just going to read a couple of quotes here. So from the 11 tips, this is number 6, and it's called Share Your Grief. So one of the most common reasons people hold back from sharing their grief is that they think that they'll be a burden to others or seem crazy and unable to hold it together. So sharing your grief not only helps you process it, but enables you to understand it. The more you open up about what you're going through, the more you're able to see specific patterns in your thought processes, your feelings, and your grieving. So even though people may be kind of awkward at first about you bringing up your child, the fact that they've died, it's really good to share your grief, because it's actually could be helpful and a way for you to cope yourself. Do you feel like that you've experienced that when you're talking to people about Joshua?
I actually just connected back on here, so I missed everything you just said. I'm so sorry.
I just
My
read the
internet went
bullet.
out.
I read the bullet point for number 6.
I was like, oh, I just lost her. I have no idea what she's talking about.
Well, luckily I talked the whole way through, so you're good.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of share my thought process then on that. So for me, I think at first I was really afraid to talk to people about how I was feeling, because I didn't want to make them feel awkward. But now, the more that I have, even if I do cry through my thoughts, I realize that people are learning. I can't empathize, right? Because they don't understand exactly how I feel, but they are more sympathetic, and then they're more they're realizing that they can talk about Mason more around me. So it's actually helping me to tell them what I need. And so if I bring up Mason and talk about, like his birthday that's coming up on Sunday, and we did a little birthday party for him, the more that I talk about him and make him still a part of my life, the more people feel like they can also talk about him. So it's really healing in the long run. And
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's safe to assume, like, they don't want to make us feel bad. So we try to avoid, those hard conversations if we think that they're going to feel awkward, because whatever, but it's not awkward for us. And people might ask us, say we do meet a stranger and they ask us how it's going. We are like, oh, we're just having a hard grief day. And it doesn't matter how far into our grief journey we are. I think it's just the fact that we enjoy talking about our kids, and we might have those hard days still. And so even if it's awkward, we can do it anyway. We can talk about it anyway. I forgot where I was going with that, but kind of get the idea. Sorry.
That's so mean. I understand. So the number 7 on that 11 tips for coping, the next bullet point here is be honest with yourself. So another thing we can do with living our taboo life is just to be honest. Our feelings of grief that we experience are all unique to us and our situation. So don't compare your suffering to that of other bereaved parents. Don't compare yourself to Stephanie and I. Some people are better able to handle these types of losses, or they may be mourning in ways that aren't apparent to you or others. And I think we kind of touched on that with our 2-part video on Let's Get Real. We're really not okay, because Stephanie and I put on a smile and talk about this like it doesn't bother us, but obviously that's not true. So don't compare the way that you're feeling watching our videos, the way that we appeared. Don't compare yourself to that, because this isn't really us. You know what I mean? Like
it is, but it isn't at the same time. We have found ways to have joy. We have found ways to, have that hope, but we still have our grief days. There's no joke about that. So yeah, don't compare your grief to ours. I used to always say that my pain is the same as anybody else's pain, no matter how much I hurt. Like someone losing their job, I'm trying to come up with an example, but that might be the hardest thing that they've ever had to go through. And so their pain, I can't lessen their pain, because they might feel the same amount of pain that I feel about losing my child as they feel about losing their job. We can't compare each other's pain,
Yeah,
their loss might be different than my loss.
I remember what you're trying to explain. It was that thought process of if that's the worst pain that they've ever felt, you can't compare that, or you can't try to diminish it just because it's not.
Exactly.
You don't feel like it's as bad as yours or as hard as yours. Yeah. That is their max level of pain. Yeah, you can't compare it. Exactly. Yeah. So in cases where you have an adult child that has died, I thought this point was helpful. It said, especially if your relationship with your child who passed away was strained or estranged, it may be that your grief reaction is not what others expect of you. So just be honest with yourself and allow the grief process to take shape in a way that makes sense for you. So, don't feel like you have to be fake about it. Like if you were estranged from your child and then they passed, you don't have to go and pretend that, it was this perfect, ideal relationship, and now they're gone. Nothing that happened didn't happen. I mean, you're still able, or you're still allowed to feel the way that you're feeling. And so just let yourself be honest with yourself, and that's part of your grief and your healing. It's definitely different from ours, because our children were so young. So we can't tell you what your grief is going to look like.
Nope, not at all. I definitely agree with that, being honest with yourself, though. I'm going to do that with my grief, and Christine's going to do that with her grief, and we're all allowed to grieve on our own timeline and in our own way. There's nothing normal about child loss, And so there's nothing normal about the way we're going to grieve. And that's just how it is. We're here to help you with your grief as much as we can. But we're not going to tell you how to grieve. There's no way of us to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's our taboo life, guys. If you have any thoughts about that or any other words of wisdom to us or anybody else who might be listening, we'd love to hear about it. So we'll post our video on our podcast and YouTube channel. So subscribe there and just make sure that you're following us and you'll get all of our posts, updates. And you can comment on our Facebook or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you guys. So
yes. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you next week.